The aircraft was already there when the forest finished growing around it. Alexei Morin saw it first as a shape interrupting the vertical order of the taiga, an intrusion of geometry where no geometry belonged. He had been walking for 3 hours through old-growth pine, cataloging soil probes for the Institute's magnetometry survey, when his compass needle began to twitch in short, nervous arcs. 10 steps later, the trees thinned, and the shape revealed itself. A narrow-body jet hung 4 meters above the moss, motionless, level, and intact. Its landing gear was retracted. The fuselage was pierced clean through by pine trunks thick as towers, their bark pressed tightly against aluminum skin without splintering either. Needles lay undisturbed on the wings. There was no smell of fuel, no scorch marks, no debris. The aircraft simply occupied the same volume as the forest, as if both had agreed to ignore the contradiction. Morin stood still until the shaking in his hands slowed. He recognized the model immediately, not from aviation manuals, but from the photographs circulated quietly in academic circles for years, always without captions, always with a warning not to ask questions. He keyed his radio. Nothing. Static swallowed his voice. The aircraft bore no airline markings anymore. Time and weather had dulled the paint to a uniform gray. But the cockpit windows were clear. Inside, the instrument panel glowed faintly, as though powered by a battery that refused to discharge. Needles were frozen mid-scale. A digital clock read 9 hours, 17 minutes, and 43 seconds. Morin checked his watch. It was 9:17. He did not approach at first. The Institute had drilled caution into him, but not for this. This was not radiation or unstable ground or unexploded ordnance. This was an ontological problem, the kind that punished haste. A sound came from the rear of the fuselage, a low, irregular whisper, like wind searching for an opening that did not exist. Morin took a step forward despite himself. As he did, movement flickered in one of the cabin windows. A face, pale, close to the glass, eyes open. A woman in a dark uniform, her hair pinned back with professional precision. She raised her hand and waved once, slowly, as if afraid to disturb something fragile. Morin stumbled backward. His heel caught a root, and he fell hard, knocking the air from his lungs. When he scrambled upright again, the window was empty. The Institute sealed the site within 6 hours. By nightfall, floodlights ringed the clearing, powered by generators flown in on heavy-lift helicopters. Men in unmarked uniforms established cordons that extended kilometers outward. Official paperwork arrived faster than Morin could read it. The aircraft was designated an anomaly. The forest became a restricted zone. Morin's field notes were confiscated, copied, returned with entire pages blacked out. He was not sent home. They needed someone who had seen it before it became a project. The lead physicist introduced herself as Dr. Irina Koval. She spoke carefully, as if every sentence might later be examined under a microscope. "We believe the aircraft never landed," she said, standing beneath the suspended fuselage. "Not in the conventional sense." "Then how did the trees grow?" Koval finished. "Yes, at a normal rate. The oldest cores suggest 20 to 30 years of growth through the structure. That's impossible. So is everything else," she said mildly. They entered the cabin through a service hatch cut into the side. The interior smelled of cold metal and old fabric. Rows of seats stood empty, seat belts neatly arranged. Overhead bins were closed. Personal items remained where they had been left. Coats folded, magazines bookmarked, a child's shoe beneath one seat. There were no bodies. In the galley, a cup of tea stood on a tray table, its surface perfectly flat, unwrinkled by time or vibration. Instruments registered a thin layer of water pooled beneath seats and along the aisle, chemically identical to melted ice. No biological traces beyond fingerprints. The cockpit told the strangest story. Flight controls were centered. Engine indicators showed cruise power. No alarms. No distress signals low. The aircraft had not descended, had not deviated, had not failed. It had simply stopped being visible. Radar records confirmed it. One moment, a stable return over the mountains. The next, nothing. No debris. No signal. The world had blinked, and the aircraft had been absent when it opened its eyes again. Koval believed it was still flying. Not here, she clarified, when Morin stared at her. But not gone either. Think of it as a trajectory through state space rather than physical space. She showed him the data they had gathered since discovery. Electromagnetic fluctuations pulsed around the tail section in irregular cycles. Gravity measurements varied by fractions of a percent, enough to confound sensitive instruments. Atomic clocks placed inside the cabin drifted out of sync with those outside by nanoseconds, then microseconds. Time was leaking. The whisper from the tail grew louder at night. Some technicians swore it formed patterns, rising and falling like breath. One claimed he heard words, though he refused to repeat them. Morin found himself returning to the window where he had seen the woman. Sometimes, if he watched long enough, reflections deepened into something more. Faces appeared and vanished. Passengers suspended in moments that never completed. A man reaching for a call button. A child turning toward a parent. The woman again, her hand hovering near the glass, uncertain. They're alive, Morin said once. Koval did not answer immediately. Define alive. The theory took shape reluctantly, assembled from equations no one wanted to own. A rare alignment of atmospheric conditions, geomagnetic anomalies, and quantum coherence at altitude. A natural resonant cavity in the mountains, amplifying vacuum fluctuations. The aircraft, a large conductive structure filled with moving charge and human consciousness, crossed the threshold at exactly the wrong moment. Or the right one. Instead of moving forward in space, it slipped sideways in time. Not backward or forward, but orthogonal into a slice of reality that overlapped the original without interacting with it. A parallel temporal layer where motion persisted, but contact did not, until the forest grew into it. The trees, anchored in ordinary time, intersected the aircraft's frozen world without resistance. Matter passed through matter, each obeying its own rules. The aircraft remained aloft because it had never fallen. It was still in cruise, still supported by forces that no longer applied. And the passengers? Morin asked. From their perspective, Koval said softly, nothing has changed. They are 40 minutes into a routine flight. They will always be 40 minutes in. The decision came from above, as such decisions always do. The site would be evacuated. The anomaly would be stabilized as much as possible, monitored. No attempts at extraction, no communication. Too dangerous. Morin argued until his voice broke. They know something is wrong, he said. They can see us. Can they? Koval asked. Or are you projecting? He had no answer. The night before the evacuation, Morin returned to the cabin. Power was scheduled to be cut off. He stood beneath the window, waiting. The woman appeared almost immediately. Closer this time, her eyes tracked his movements with unmistakable intent. She pressed her palm into the glass. Morin did the same. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the whisper surged, resolving into a vibration he felt in his lungs. The air thickened. His vision blurred the edges. The glass softened. It was not melting. It was losing its certainty. Morin pushed. The surface yielded, rippling like water under his hand. Pain flared as cold bit in his skin. He forced his arm through, then his shoulder. The sensation was unbearable, a pressure that threatened to pull him apart along invisible sleeves. And grabbed him. The woman's face was inches from his, her mouth moving, soundless. The cabin behind her was full now, crowded with figures frozen mid-motion, their eyes alive with fear and hope. For one impossible second, Morin existed in both worlds. He smelled recycled air, heard the hum of engines, felt gravity tilt as the aircraft banked slightly, eternally correcting a course it would never complete. Then the pressure reversed. He was thrown backward, collapsing onto the forest floor as the window snapped back into solidity. The whisper faded. The faces vanished. Morin lay there until dawn, shaking, his arm numb and bruised but intact. They sealed the site as planned. The forest reclaimed the clearing at its own pace. Official records were lost, then destroyed. The Institute moved on to safer anomalies. Years later, Morin would publish a paper on non-intersecting temporal manifolds, couched in abstract language and mathematical caution. It would be cited occasionally, misunderstood often. Sometimes, late at night, he dreamed of a clock frozen at 9 hours, 17 minutes, and 43 seconds, of a woman waiting patiently, her hand raised in a gesture that would never be answered. The aircraft still hangs in the taiga, for meters above the ground, flying forever toward a destination it will never reach.